Hi, everyone. Welcome to Expanding Wisdom today. Today we have Brandy Vencel from AfterthoughtsBlog.net with us, and we are talking about the idea of principles and also her new book, which is a study guide for Charlotte Mason's 20 Principles. Just a little bit more about Brandy. Brandy, like I said, she writes and owns AfterthoughtsBlog.net. She is a homeschooling mom and you graduated from Biola University and Talbot Theological Seminary, correct?
Yes.
And how long have you actually been writing your blog? 9 years, right?
Yeah, it'll be 9 years at the end of the month.
So she's had Afterthoughts blog for 9 years and is also very involved with Ambleside Online. You're one of the board members. When did you find Ambleside Online? How long ago was that?
Oh, before we started homeschooling, and my oldest is in 7th grade, so gosh, what year would that be? I don't even know what year that would be, but I would say probably 8 or 9 years ago, I actually stumbled upon the website, and then they formed the auxiliary board. Gosh, I don't know how many years it's been, 2 or 3 years ago. So that's kind of a more recent thing for me.
Okay, great.
Working with
Well,
them.
if you haven't seen Ambleside Online, any of you, it's a great, great resource for classical and Charlotte Mason educators. And we're of the mind that they're the same thing, that Charlotte Mason's a wonderful embodiment of the classical tradition. And so, yeah, we're here to talk about that, about your book, about principles versus particulars and all of those things. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. So maybe we should start out, in case there's anyone who hasn't heard of Charlotte Mason, maybe just a few, it doesn't have to be a long, introduction, but just a little bit about who she is, so we can kind of orient our listeners to what we're talking about.
Okay. Charlotte Mason was a British educational philosopher. I'm not sure exactly how to pin her down, really, because she had so many things that she did. But she was born in, I think, the 1840s and died in the 1920s. So that kind of gives you her era. She lived in Ambleside, England. And she ran what was called the PNEU, which was the Parents National Education Union. And so from that meant that she, what did she do? I mean, she trained teachers. She wrote curriculum that was used with many students and at many different schools. She edited a magazine, but really what she's known for is her philosophy and then her practices. Because she wrote curriculum, we actually get to see how she put her philosophy into practice, which is, I think, somewhat unique among educational philosophers, because a lot of them, you read a lot of writing, but they didn't actually spend a lot of time with children, especially younger children, which is what all of us homeschoolers are working with. So she's kind of unique in that regard, and that we really get to see her practice and not just her philosophy.
Yeah, I hadn't had that thought before, but that's true. Normally, yeah, you just have a lot of theory type of books and not so wow, okay, that's awesome. I don't know, I didn't have that thought before. Yeah, okay, great. So that's who Charlotte Mason is. And like I said before, at Expanding Wisdom, and I know that Brandy has the same view, that we really believe that Charlotte Mason is steeped into the classical tradition, and that she is one great way of carrying out the classical tradition. Do you want to say anything about that, Brandy?
Well, I know that in her writings, she basically said that she wasn't coming up. She had been criticized based as not having anything new to say, and she basically responded with, "Right, I don't have anything new to say." She was very comfortable, I think, with just sort of being a modern, for her time, application of the best of the old principles. And so I definitely think that she saw herself as contributing to part of the great conversation. Yeah.
Cool. So your new book is called Start Here, A Journey Through Charlotte Mason's 20 Principles. So tell us why you wrote that book, and even if you wanted to talk about just the idea of principles, anything that you wanted to share.
Okay. Well, the book actually started as something that I was just doing for my own local group. I had a local group for a long time that was meeting. And then suddenly we started getting all these inquiries from people that wanted to join us. They had heard that we were reading through some of Charlotte Mason's books. And so we kind of got together and we're trying to think of, what's a way that we could kind of catch all these people up to where we are. What would be the most efficient way to study what she's saying? Because it is, she wrote thousands of pages, so it is a lot to dig through.
Yeah.
And so we, as a group, there were 5 of us, decided that probably the best thing to do was to try to walk through her principles. And so I never intended to write, a study guide or anything. It was just something I started doing for our group. And then when Ambleside opened their help forum, I thought, oh, this is a great way to start off the forum. So I did another version of it there. And once I had done it twice and I had people saying, oh, this is so great, or I even had people email me and say, can I use this with my local group? I thought, oh, I really should put this out here. Like, why are we all reinventing the wheel? I kept coming across people who are working so hard to develop something similar. And so I thought I should just make this available so that if people want to not have to write their own, it would be there. I had the chance to test it twice, which helped because I could kind of figure out how a conversation naturally flows. Mm-hmm. And so certain times I actually combined a couple of the principles because I found that you really couldn't separate them in conversation. And so trying to say, well, we're going to wait till the next meeting to talk about that would be very frustrating. So we just kind of put it all together. Yeah. So that's kind of where the guide came from. Mm-hmm. But for us, the reason why we decided to study the 20 principles was more because we felt like a lot of people come to the table with Charlotte Mason where Charlotte Mason is, and the list is all these different practices. And while that's true, like she did do nature study and she did do narration, and not necessarily every practice that's associated with the Charlotte Mason education is actually in her 20 principles. And I don't know, I often use the principles as sort of like the test of orthodoxy, in the sense that like these are the essentials and these are the things that are maybe really good ideas but aren't necessarily essential. So I was having this conversation with a friend actually a couple nights ago. We were talking about notebooks because on the blog right now I'm writing a series on Charlotte Mason's use of notebooks. And we were just talking about how, that the notebooks really do embody certain of her principles, like developing attention and giving sustained attention, and they seem to embody the spirit of a Charlotte Mason education. So I love them and I consider them indispensable, but they're not in the principles. And so if somebody is doing a Charlotte Mason education but not using notebooks for whatever reason, I wouldn't say that person's not, they're not doing a Charlotte Mason education because they don't have notebooks. But I mean, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like it kind of helps us narrow down like what was a Charlotte Mason education, because that's what she was doing when she wrote her 20 principles. She herself was narrowing down, these are the limits, these are the essentials, right, and the other things are the embodiment. And so, there's probably more room to flesh that out within the embodiment part of it. So, this is kind of how I came up with the idea. It wasn't really me. It was a group effort.
Yeah, well, I think most good things start that way. So, yeah.
True.
So talk to me more about principles. Why? I mean, you already mentioned a little bit why the principles are better than the particulars, but let's go, if you can, if you'd like to, can we go into that a little bit more? What is it about the nature of principles versus just telling somebody what to do, and what would be hard, or if we just tried to tell, okay, this is what you do, what frustrations versus the beauty and freedom of principles?
Well, I think, gosh, there's a few different ways that we could answer this question. I feel like, well, first of all, I'm not super comfortable telling people what to do because I really don't know everyone's home life and their situation. And, like there's a lot of people that'll say, in a Charlotte Mason education, you should be done by lunch, or you should be done by 1 because you should have the whole afternoon. And, her schools did get, they had limited hours and the children did have some afternoon free time and that kind of thing. But within the realm of homeschooling, people get up at different times and they have different lifestyles and that. So I don't feel like the most efficient thing or the best thing that I could do for people would be to say, you need to get up at this time and do things for this number of hours. And, and I feel like that's kind of where we get into practices.
Right.
And I'm not sure we're all created to be the same and to look the same. And so while a school has good reasons for doing everything the same,
right,
in homeschooling we have a lot of freedom. And so I think principles are especially useful in homeschooling because we have all this freedom. So the principles are almost like, these are the limits on our freedom, these are the things that we're gonna fit all of our application into this box of the principles. And so the principles are our guiding philosophy. They give us our unity, but then our practices are kind of where we have our diversity, which is really a beautiful thing. I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of the times when I've really struggled and where I've gotten ideas is when, someone else was using a different practice within the same philosophy.
Yes.
And that was where I got the great idea. And maybe I didn't exactly copy them, but I was able to jump off of what they were doing and find the solution,
right,
for my own situation. So, and the other thing is we want people to grow up and think for themselves.
right.
And so when we prescribe these long lists of how-tos, it gets kind of dangerous because then what if that doesn't work? But within sort of the whole teach a man to fish, give a fish.
I was just thinking that same thing.
So with the principles, it takes longer. I mean, the way this curriculum is designed, if you go through it, in most groups meet once a month. So if you have a monthly meeting, it's 15 months. I mean, it does take time. But at the end of that, my hope is that people really can start thinking on their own, and they're not dependent on, my blog or your blog or anybody's blog to say, this is what it looks like. And so then the blogs just become, these are examples of how we flesh out these principles, but it's not the only way to do it. And so I just feel like it gives a lot more independence to people, I hope, long term.
I completely agree. And one example that sticks out in my mind for myself was when I was reading Karen Glass's new book, Consider This. And she talked about Charlotte Mason's principle of education is the science of relations. So, and for the first time, that principle exploded in my brain and I got it. And I understood, okay, this is about developing relationships. And so I was able to look at all of what I was doing through this lens. Okay, is this developing a relationship? Is this helping my student develop a relationship with history, with that leaf that they're drawing? Is it helping them develop a relationship with the characters in the book, with the relationship with other people? And that question is so much easier than racking my brain. Oh, am I doing the right thing? Oh, I need to make sure. Look at, all these classical websites and all these, they have all these different things. Well, I'm not doing enough because I'm not doing all these things well, I am doing enough because what I am doing is helping them build a relationship. And so I can let myself off the hook. It gives me more confidence that I'm doing enough too.
Yeah, it really is a confidence builder. I think you hit the nail on the head there. That it really, once you kind of mastered the principles, or maybe it's better to say mastered by the principles, then
that's good.
Then really you do start being able to be more independent and confident in what you're doing. And there's so many blogs and websites, and it's kind of clamorous. You can start to feel like there's so much to do and so little time to do it in. And I think it's a lot simpler than we let it be sometimes, sadly.
Yeah. So tell us a few of, so just a recap. So you wrote a book about Charlotte Mason's 20 principles. They're kind of the outlining format. What she feels is we have to have these. Outside of this, if we can't have anything else, we have to have this. So what are some of those principles? I know I just mentioned about the science of relations, but I think, was that actually a principle, or that was a principle, or was that her definition of education? I couldn't remember.
It just made me nervous. I'm thinking, gosh, I should have memorized the 20 principles.
Well, I'm not telling you to give me the whole list, but just a few of them.
Yeah, the very first one is probably one of the more famous ones, but it's that children are born persons. And And I love that because for her time, she was very revolutionary, because there was sort of this sense that the child was born as less than a person and then kind of evolved into a person, you know, through their growth into adulthood.
Right.
And so for her to say, you know, from the very beginning, the child is a person, just an inexperienced, immature person, but still a person,
Right.
was actually very revolutionary. I mean, I feel like for our time, we actually have more accepted that. And so sometimes it's easy for us to be like, well, okay, what's the big deal about that? But when we put her in her historical context, she was saying something, I think, pretty significant. So some of her principles are more like practices, I would say. Narration comes to mind. So the idea that when a child reads something or has something read to him, then he's supposed to tell it back orally or on paper, it can be written, some or part of what he has read in his own words. And so it's sort of like he takes it in and he thinks about it, and then it comes back out of him in his own way, like he's kind of,
Right.
almost said reincarnated. That's a dangerous word. So,
Yeah,
but
embodied.
so yeah, exactly. That's a better word. So, you know, that's a practice that she considered so indispensable that she called it a principle. And so I love that part of it too, because then we get to see, so there are certain practices that are maybe indispensable.
Yeah.
You know, and so she kind of, you know, sliced through some of that too, I think, when she chose certain things as being essentials. But you have other things like education is a discipline.
Right.
Education is an atmosphere. Education is a life. And then within her principles, she goes through and fleshes out what she really means by those words. She doesn't take it for granted that we would know exactly what she meant just by reading the phrase itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all sorts of things. I find it interesting. In her first book, I want to say there were more like 16 principles. And so she did add as time went on until I'm not sure. I'm trying to think if it's only volume 6 that has 20, but I think the 20 were solidified before that. I think it might have been her 4th or 5th book where finally it had the full 20 principles. But for anybody who owns like a hard copy that has all of her volumes, it's interesting to go through because you can kind of see how she added things along the way. And
yeah.
I don't know. It's always interesting to me to watch that development because we really get to see her philosophical development throughout a really long period of time, because she lived into her and wrote and worked into her 80s. And so, you know, it's just, I don't know. I love seeing that growth. I mean, it's even encouraging to me as a person to think, you know, this is what she knew at my age, you know, and then she lived
right
a century in order to develop that. You know, that's just really kind of not quite. I'm not that young, but anyway. I'll pretend I'm not young. So.
You're fine. Yeah, that's awesome. That is really cool to see that, because I think it gives also us hope for. I haven't read her volumes. I've read sections of them, and they're definitely on my list. I read through, because I'm actually pretty new to Charlotte, researching any of Charlotte Mason. It wasn't until the last 2 years that I even realized that she was a legitimate embodiment of the classical tradition. And so I'm very new at researching and understanding her principles. So your study guide's going to help me with that.
Great. That's what it's for.
Yeah. So speaking of the study guide, how might one use this, your book, your study guide, start here?
Well, I sort of wrote it with 2 different situations in mind. So it was originally written for groups, and I do think groups are a fantastic way to study something like this. I just love all the different perspectives that I know that I get when I'm in the group context studying this sort of thing. And so that's why it's formatted the way that it is. It'll say required reading, and it has very few selections, usually just 1 or 2 assignments. And then it has optional reading, and it has this huge amount of stuff where it's other things that Charlotte Mason herself wrote, articles from the magazine that she edited, and then even usually 3, maybe 4 posts from different blogs that I thought really covered the topic well. Sometimes it's me, but sometimes, a lot of times it's other just really good posts that I've stumbled upon over the years. And the reason why I did that was because within the context of my local group, if I had sent out that whole huge list, it would have been a deal breaker for a lot of people. We had some, very young moms with nursing babies that were not going to be able to put in the time to read all of what I put in there. So I wanted it to be really clear, like this is the required, this is sort of the essential to really be able to have a discussion within the context of the group. Okay. But then, I felt like some people come to this, or maybe it's just one principle, they come to it really hungry to understand it and learn more about it. And that wouldn't be enough for them. They just really, they need more to read. And so here were all the other things that I could come up with that would feed that appetite. And so that works really well for groups. I think as an individual, someone would have a lot more, or could give themselves a lot more time and actually go through all of it or most of it. And sometimes I do put a note. I'll say, if you only read one optional reading, here's the one that I suggest as the most important one. Or if you only read one blog post, if you only read one article, or like when there was definitely one that I thought stood out above the rest, I tried to note that. Yeah. In the guide on sort of like a sidebar sort of thing that I put in there. And so, so I feel like, so in a group context, usually you do have a leader that could develop questions, but I've always tried to encourage our group to bring questions, to come to the table with the things that they're wondering about, because especially as lots of times as leaders, it's not the first time we're thinking about things, which means we've sometimes forgotten the first questions that come to mind. Because if this is my 5th reading, I've already answered all those questions, and this stuff over here is what I'm interested in, and so I feel like a really good thing that group members can do is actually bring their own questions.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
And they make sure that really what they're concerned with gets answered too. But as an individual, I think there's a lot of options for, well, I would almost think journaling would be a good option.
Yeah.
Writing through, commonplacing some of it, but also going through, I have some discussion questions in there to kind of jumpstart thought processes, but really journaling through this idea of, this is this principle. What does that look like in my home? Am I embodying that principle? Do I agree with that principle? I mean, she's not God. So we can struggle with some of what she said,
Right. I know sometimes it's like, don't say anything against the lady or any, and not just Charlotte Mason, but like anyone who I hold. For me, it would probably be David Hicks, where sometimes I'll go and be like, well, if David Hicks said it,
it must be true.
And I mean, and most of, such an incredible thinker, but just, remembering that even when we're reading books like Charlotte Mason or anything, also just being careful about it. That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah. And so I love that you made the study guide open for individuals and groups. And it sounds like you can just really go at your own pace. So you don't have to feel like you're under pressure to have it done at a certain time and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, if someone wanted to do it, I would say 15 months is probably the optimal pace. Okay. Well, and that's not skipping months. My group actually does not meet in September. Sometimes it's August, but basically the month where school is starting for most of us. And then we also don't meet in December because the holidays just get so busy for everyone. And so for us, it did take about 2 years just because, we skipped that, and then it worked out where that happened twice. And then I think, if I remember right, there was also the great stomach flu epidemic of 2012 where we canceled an extra month that time. So groups are like that. So it can take a long time.
Right.
But even as an individual, I feel like if someone wanted to have a pace, I think a principle a month actually ends up being a really good pace. I don't know if I would have said that to begin with, but as I'm realizing how deep these things really can go, some of the principles feel a little deeper than others.
Right.
So many of them, there's so many ramifications, and especially if you want to read a lot of the optional reading, I could see it taking at least a month to really meditate through it and just decide where you stand in regard to it and what that then is going to look like in your own life.
Right. And it also seems like layers would even be a good idea too. It's like, okay, maybe I do a quick read through just to familiarize myself with them and then go back and do it slower too. So like you could do so many things with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I should have thought of that.
It's only because I had it drilled into my head for 3 years in the apprenticeship. Stay on the surface. Stay on the surface. But so we are actually going to be giving away a couple copies of your book, right?
Yes. Yes.
So we're really excited about that. And so so everyone who's listening to this or comes in and hears more about your book, you can there's instructions below this video to tell you how to enter. You just enter the drawing and it will tell you the day down there when we'll pick the winner, and then you get a free copy of the book. How exciting.
Right.
Thank you so much for allowing us to do that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what people think of it. Maybe some of you can then read it with me, so I won't be alone.
Alone is bad.
Yeah. No. So in closing, is there anything else about studying principles, about your book, about Charlotte Mason, just about self-education or anything like that that you think that you want to say to our listeners before we go?
I guess one thing I was thinking was just the idea that groups and just forming a learning community has ended up being really formative for me, and I think it's been really formative for you in some of the conversations that we've had. Yes. And I just I know some people really are truly just alone. You know, they're the only homeschooler they know and that kind of thing. But, you know, my group actually has at least one person who's not homeschooling. They're just kind of there doing research, you know. Yeah. So it's I don't even think your group has to be exclusively homeschoolers. Just has to be people who are interested in learning more about the philosophy. But I really think, you know, I don't know, for me, it was just a prayer. I felt very alone. There were a lot of very school at home instead of home education type families where I live. And this is, I mean, actually, I don't think that's the case now because it's been 7 years and a lot has changed. But when I was first starting, I so felt that way. And God really did provide. And it started with just a really small group. There were only 3 of us for a while, and then we grew to 5. And we stayed that way for a long time. And so I've had people contacting me and asking about, you know, forming a group and starting a group. And I just thought, you know, it doesn't have to be huge. It can be you and one other person, you know, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be you and one other person at Starbucks. Right. So no one has to, you know, come up with a fancy spread and clean their house and all the stuff we put the pressure on ourselves to do. Right. But I would just say, I mean, it's great. It's great to do it alone. And I don't want to discourage people who are intending to do that. But I kind of feel like, you know, if you can form a group, I think you'll find that it's really rewarding and in so many other ways than just that we learned together. Because I know for us then that eventually turned into little field trips that we actually did. You know, we were meeting alone without children. Only nursing babies were coming. And, you know, but that eventually, you know, so then we got together with kids, and then for a while there was the co-op, and just all these different things that kind of came out of that. And because we all shared the same philosophy, there was a lot of peace in how we went about doing that too. And so anyway, I would just really encourage the group setting if people are thinking about it to be brave and start it. Yes. You know, this is what I did as a group leader, and all the work's done for you. So. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great idea. And I also think what you said about praying is important, because sometimes you may not know who is in your circle, but God sees the big picture and he can direct you to the right people. And also, I mean, don't they discuss this on Ambleside online forums? I mean, isn't there a lot of activity there as well?
There is. And actually in the guide, I put a link to the old discussion. I'm trying to remember what year that was. I think it might have been 2012 that I led that on the Ambleside forum. And we did it really fast. It was too fast. I think it was every other week. So it was really too fast. But it doesn't exactly line up because I did change a few things. But if someone wanted to, it was felt very isolated, but wanted to interact, that link that's in the study guide takes them to, it's like a linked table of contents. And so it'll say, principle 1, and it's a hyperlink, so they can jump to where that discussion is.
Oh, awesome.
In the forum. And so they can actually read through the discussion that was had a couple of years ago, and those threads are still open. So they are free to go ahead and rejuvenate them. They can comment, and people may even start their own discussion there, even though it's considered an old, discussion. And so that's totally available. And then on top of that,
right.
the forum is open to just general discussion.
Right. And I'm sure people just jump on questions all the time too.
Oh,
so they would love that. Yeah. So if you are in another country and there's no one else homeschooling in a Charlotte Mason or classical method, you can go to Ambleside Online.
That's right.
So, okay. Well, yeah, I think that's really important. So I would encourage all of you to do that as well. Is there anything else that you want to share with us?
Trying to think. I think that might be all. I don't know, unless you have more questions.
No, I think I wanted to talk about principles and the community and Charlotte Mason, and we have.
Covered it.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And offering books to give away. People are going to love that.
My pleasure.
So sign up or enter the drawing below this video, and we'll see who the winner is.
And I'll be happy to email it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.